the moment that changed the supercar industry forever. In 1963, a small factory opened in Sant'Agata Bolognese, a quiet town in the Emilia-Romagna region of northern Italy, 40 miles from Rome, 20 miles from Medina. No one at the time understood what it would become. Within a decade, this factory would produce the only car brand on the planet capable of humiliating Ferrari on its own terms. Not on the racetrack first, but in the minds of customers who had spent decades believing there was no alternative to the prancing horse. But this was not a startup born in a garage by a 20-year-old with a dream. It was born from something far older and far more dangerous. It was born from arrogance. The greatest rival Ferrari ever faced did not arrive from Detroit. It did not arrive from Stuttgart or Munich. It arrived from a man Enzo Ferrari publicly dismissed. A man who built tractors. Tonight, we trace how one of the most powerful figures in the history of automotive manufacturing made a catastrophic miscalculation. One that would cost Ferrari its monopoly on Italian excellence and permanently reshape the global luxury car market. And before the 5-minute mark, you will understand the exact moment Ferrari accidentally engineered its own worst enemy. The betrayal did not happen on a racetrack. It happened in a boardroom, and it started with a clutch. By the late 1950s, Ferrari was untouchable. The prancing horse, Il Cavallino Rampante, symbolized something that no other brand in the world had fully replicated: the synthesis of raw speed and Italian national identity. Enzo Ferrari was not simply a chief executive. He was closer to a monarch. He had built the brand from war-era ruins and post-war determination, and by 1958, he was the final word on everything from engine tuning to who was allowed through his front gate. Meanwhile, a man named Ferruccio Lamborghini was building tractors. He had founded Lamborghini Trattori in 1948, selling farm equipment to a post-war Italy desperately rebuilding its agricultural base. He was good at it. Exceptional, in fact, and the wealth he accumulated gave him the freedom to pursue the thing he loved almost as much as engineering: fast Italian cars. He drove a Ferrari 250 GT. He was, by every definition, an ideal Ferrari customer. And that is where the empire cracked. In 1958, Ferrari was not merely a car company. It was an institution, a cultural artifact as much as a commercial enterprise. Customers accepted imperfections, long delivery waits, and inflated prices without serious complaint because the act of purchasing a Ferrari was itself the point. You were not just buying a machine. You were buying proximity to racing royalty, to Le Mans, to the Mille Miglia. The brand carried weight that no balance sheet could fully capture, and Enzo Ferrari understood this with the precision of a man who had crafted that identity by hand over 3 decades. But when Ferruccio Lamborghini purchased his Ferrari 250 GT, he began to notice something that the average customer either ignored or accepted. The clutch failed. Repeatedly. Not once, not twice. It was a pattern. Lamborghini, as an engineer who had built transmission systems for agricultural machinery, did not treat mechanical failure the way a status-conscious buyer might. He opened the car up. He had his mechanics examine it. And what they found was instructive. The clutch components were sourced from a supplier that Lamborghini Trattori itself used for its own vehicles. The markup Ferrari applied to those components was extraordinary. But for Lamborghini, it was never really about the money. It was about engineering pride. Ferruccio Lamborghini believed that a car selling at Ferrari's price point should perform at a level that justified every lira. The clutch issue was not a minor inconvenience to him. It was a statement about what Ferrari valued and what it did not. And so he did what a man of his directness and confidence would do. He requested a meeting with Enzo Ferrari. He went in person to Medina. He brought his observations. He brought his expertise. He came not as an antagonist, but as a customer who believed the product could be meaningfully improved. What happened in that meeting would define the next 60 years of the luxury automotive industry. Before we continue this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. According to multiple historical accounts, including interviews with people who knew both men and biographies drawing on contemporaneous records, the meeting between Ferruccio Lamborghini and Enzo Ferrari did not go well. The specific words vary by source. This was a private conversation between 2 proud Italian men in 1958, and the only documentation comes from recollections rather than transcripts. But the substance of what happened is not disputed. Enzo Ferrari dismissed Lamborghini's concerns. He allegedly told him, in terms that left no room for ambiguity, to leave the cars to Ferrari and return to his tractors. In that moment, Enzo Ferrari did not simply insult a difficult customer. He underestimated a capitalist with capital, engineering expertise, and nothing left to prove in his existing industry. He misread the room in the most consequential way imaginable. Ferruccio Lamborghini was not a man who responded to humiliation with wounded silence. He responded with action. And critically, he has been quoted over the years as clarifying that what drove him was not revenge. It was the desire for superiority. He wanted to build a better car. He was now simply motivated to do so. What Enzo Ferrari failed to anticipate was the specific form that action would take. Lamborghini did not simply commission an Italian coach builder to produce a one-off Grand Tourer. He founded a company. In 1963, Automobili Lamborghini was officially established, and Ferruccio made a decision that would become one of the most audacious talent acquisitions in automotive history. He hired the engineers Ferrari had discarded. In the late 1950s, a group of Ferrari's most technically gifted employees, frustrated by internal politics and Enzo's autocratic management style, had resigned in what became known informally as the Palace Revolt. Among them was Giotto Bizzarini, the engineer largely credited with designing Ferrari's legendary V12 engine. Lamborghini hired him. He hired several of the others. Ferrari had handed his new rival the intellectual foundation for a world-class supercar program. Think about the question this raises for every manager watching this. How would you react if your boss asked you to simply dismiss the most substantive product feedback you had ever received, and then watch that customer walk out the door and hire your best engineers? Does the certainty of your own dominance justify that kind of disregard for the humans in front of you? Ferrari realizes the threat. At first, Ferrari laughed. The automotive press in Italy in the early 1960s treated Lamborghini's new venture with the combination of curiosity and condescension that the industry typically reserves for outsiders. A tractor man building a GT car. The 350 GT debuted in 1964 and was met with more serious attention than Ferrari had anticipated. It was refined, powerful, and clearly the product of genuine engineering rigor rather than ambition alone. Ferrari's internal reaction was measured dismissal. The brand was still dominant. Racing victories continued to pile up. The prancing horse was not yet looking over its shoulder. Then came the Miura. In 1966, Lamborghini unveiled a car that the automotive world had genuinely not seen before. Mid-engine layout. A transversely mounted V12. A design by Bertone's Marcello Gandini so radical in its proportions that it was initially assumed by many observers to be a concept rather than a production vehicle. The Miura was faster than anything Ferrari offered in its price bracket. It was louder. It was younger in its aesthetic DNA. And it proved something that Ferrari had not anticipated. That the customer Enzo had dismissed understood both performance and comfort at a level sophisticated enough to attract buyers who might otherwise have never considered anything other than the prancing horse. Ferrari had created a rival that understood its own customers better than it did in certain critical dimensions. The Miura was not a fringe product for enthusiasts on the edge of the market. It was a genuine alternative for the most discerning buyers in the world. Suddenly, and for the first time, Ferrari faced meaningful competition for Italian identity in the luxury GT category from a domestic source. The era of unchallenged monopoly was over, and the man who ended it was the man Enzo had told to go back to his tractors. Here is the twist that the business press rarely articulates with full clarity. Ferrari did not lose to Lamborghini because of a lack of resources. Ferrari did not lose to Lamborghini because of inferior engineering talent. It had some of the finest automotive engineers on the planet on its payroll throughout the 1960s and beyond. Ferrari had the capital, the brand equity, the institutional knowledge, and the racing credibility to have seen Lamborghini's threat coming and responded to it before it matured into a permanent competitive reality. What it lacked was not capacity. What it lacked was a single quality that does not appear on any balance sheet. Humility. The willingness to hear an unwelcome truth from someone standing outside the official hierarchy of expertise. Ferruccio Lamborghini was not a trained automotive engineer in the Ferrari tradition. He was a self-made industrialist with a mechanical gift and a genuine grievance. His feedback about the clutch was accurate. His analysis of the component sourcing was accurate. His conclusion, that Ferrari's quality could be improved at the price point it was charging, was accurate. And Enzo Ferrari, at the peak of his power, did not have the organizational culture or the personal disposition to absorb that feedback and use it. That failure did not destroy Ferrari, but it permanently altered the market it operated in. The deeper lesson here cuts across every industry and every era of business history. The greatest strategic vulnerability of dominant organizations is not the competitor they are watching. It is the adjacent player they have dismissed. Ferruccio Lamborghini was not in Ferrari's threat model because Ferruccio Lamborghini made tractors. He was categorized as irrelevant before he had the chance to be evaluated. That categorical error, the refusal to take seriously anyone outside a narrowly defined peer group, is one of the most common and most costly mistakes in corporate history. It shows up in every major industry disruption. It showed up in Medina in 1958, and it cost Ferrari the monopoly it had spent 3 decades building. 4 compounding failures. The post-mortem on Ferrari's strategic blindness in this period reveals 4 compounding failures that any business student or executive would recognize immediately. First, the dismissal of customer feedback on the grounds of perceived expertise hierarchy. Second, the failure to retain key engineering talent, allowing the Palace Revolt to drain institutional knowledge directly to a new competitor. Third, the underestimation of adjacent industry entrants as credible threats. And fourth, perhaps most consequentially, the conflation of brand strength with competitive permanence, the belief that legacy alone would protect market position indefinitely. What history remembers? Today, both Ferrari and Lamborghini are thriving global brands. Ferrari listed on the New York Stock Exchange, Lamborghini owned by Volkswagen Group's Audi division. Both generate billions in annual revenue. Both have waiting lists for their flagship models that stretch years into the future. By the conventional metrics of business success, this story does not have a villain and a victim in the traditional sense. Both brands won. The market was large enough to accommodate 2 symbols of Italian automotive excellence. But history is not neutral on the question of origins. Lamborghini exists because Ferrari refused to listen. That is not a rhetorical flourish. It is the documented sequence of cause and effect that produced the second greatest supercar brand in the world. Enzo Ferrari's arrogance was the market condition that made Automobili Lamborghini not just possible, but necessary. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for your greatest competitor is to make them feel small. Ferruccio Lamborghini felt small in that Medina office in 1958, and he spent the next decade building something large enough that no one would ever make that mistake again. The customer you dismiss today may be the competitor you cannot ignore tomorrow. What's your take on this? Comment below. I'm reading every single one. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and send it to someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, check out the previous videos on the channel.